The Dow Jones Industrial Average set a record late last week, surpassing the 40,000 mark for the first time ever. Late Thursday and again yesterday, the Dow crossed the 40,000 mark, which is the only time in the history of the Dow going back to 1984 that the stock market index has hit that number. The Dow is the index of 30 prominent stocks listed in the U.S. and is the oldest and most commonly followed equity index. Joining us now to discuss this new record and what it means for investors is Brendan Caldwell, director at Caldwell Securities Limited. Brendan, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Theresa.
The markets are at an all-time high, with Dow briefly crossing 40,000 for the first time. What does this mean for investors?
Well, most people don't own the markets. They own individual stocks or strategies, funds, what have you. I think it's generally encouraging for people that things are going well, but they often say that a bull market climbs a wall of fear. And people wonder, oh, is it too high or too high? What'll happen if this or what'll happen if that? But the bull markets, that is to say markets that are charging ahead, that are going up, like the one we're in right now, which has honestly surprised everyone. If you'd told people 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and I guess it is now, that we'd have a global pandemic, that interest rates would go from nearly zero to multiples of that, 5-6%, that mortgage rates would have gone up as high as they have. And yet the stock market, not just the Dow Jones, but the NASDAQ, which is more heavily technology focused, and the S&P 500 would all be at record highs. I don't think people would think that's a credible story, but that's in fact what's happened.
Now, Brendan, take us back. What have the all-time high milestones historically meant?
Well, it's a way of people keeping track of, because I mean, the Dow of 50 years ago, when it was, people wondered whether the Dow would ever get through the level of 1,000, is not the same Dow Jones Industrial Average that exists now. In fact, the last original Dow company to get eliminated from the index was a General Electric Corporation, which is now splintered into 3 different companies. So it's not the same index. It's meant to be, I guess, sort of a metric of where markets have been. And it got to 1,000 in the late 60s, the Dow did. And then a really terrible bear market in 1974 took it down to, I think, 400. So it was down something like 60% between the beginning and the end of a bear market, which is the opposite of bull market, where the gains are being clawed back. I got the hair and the claws to show you. And then it got to 1,000 again around 1980. Like literally took 6 or 7 years to get back through that level. And if you think about it, from 1980 at 1,000, give or take, to the present 40,000, it means if you just own the U.S. market, you literally have 40 times your money. And other indices like the NASDAQ have actually outperformed even that, despite even greater corrections, say during the tech wreck of 2000. I do recall on its way up, the Dow, which was well above 10,000 at one point in the mid 2000s, fell back down below 10,000. Maybe it was during the financial crisis, but the headlines were "The gates of hell have opened," which seemed a lot dramatic.
Now, there's this saying.
The funny thing is,
sorry, carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, go on. No, it's just sorry, ask your question, please.
There's a saying, sell in May and go away. Does this still make sense?
Well, it's a funny thing. Bull markets that are charging ahead, particularly markets that are hitting new highs, don't tend to, in fact, almost never have gone from hitting new highs to going straight down. Normally speaking, and I say normally because it's happened every other time in history except at COVID, which was a bizarre outside exogenous shock to the system. Normally speaking, the market rolls over for a period before heading down. There's a bit of an arc to it. So I think this summer will be at worst the market going sideways. Probably not, unless there's some other great shock to the system, a real pullback. So I think investors can start investing even in May and be reasonably confident having as much or more money come September.
Brendan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, stay with us. Coming up after the break, we'll be looking at today's top international headlines. The International Criminal Court seeks arrest warrants for Hamas's top leaders and Israel's prime minister. A date has been set for the burial of Iran's president, who passed away in a helicopter crash. That and more when we return.